to discuss today. Ellen Millander is the Omar and Althea Hoskins Professor of Classical Studies and Humanities. Before coming to Reed in 2002, she studied classics and ancient history at Brown University, Oxford University, and the University of Pennsylvania. At Reed, she has had years of experience in the first-year humanities course, and she teaches both Greek and Latin languages and ancient texts, as well as ancient Mediterranean history and historiography. She has published broadly on ancient Sparta on topics ranging from women, literacy, Sparta's unusual dual kingship, and hoplite warfare. She is one of the very few historians in the United States whose research focuses especially on ancient Sparta. And then we have two members of the math faculty. David Perkinson
Hello.
Is taught at Reed for more than 30 years. He is the Frank Loxley Griffin Professor of Mathematics. His PhD is from the University of Chicago, where he was trained in algebraic geometry. I'll leave it to him to describe his specialized interests. As a teacher, his interest must be very broad. He has directed approximately 40 senior theses on a wide range of topics. The other mathematician is Jamie Pommersheim, the Catherine Pigott Professor of Mathematics. He joined the faculty in 2004, having earned his PhD at the University of Chicago, and he has held postdoc positions at the Institute for Advanced Study, MIT, and University of California at Berkeley. He's taught at New Mexico State University and Pomona College. Published in several fields, including algebraic geometry, number theory, and topology. Now the questions for the faculty conversation. In our day at Reed long ago, a high percentage of students went on directly to earn higher degrees in preparation for academic careers. Reed now graduates many more students, and I expect that in general they are better educated than we were, but their career paths must be very different from ours. What can each of you faculty tell us from your experience about Reed's evolving academic mission and how it prepares students for life after Reed? The other theme that I want faculty to develop or respond to, Reed's faculty today is much larger than in the old days and more engaged in research and publication. Academic programs are more departmentalized, but it seems that the curriculum has become more interdisciplinary by design. How has this affected the research activities and teaching experience of Reed's faculty? So now I'll ask the faculty to speak, beginning with Professor Millander, and then Professors Perkinson and Pommersheim. I'll be keeping an eye on the time so that we can allow at least half an hour, maybe more, for conversation with alumni. I'll just let the faculty converse with us and with each other.
Well, hi, everybody. Again, so I'm Ellen Millander, and I want to point out something which, if you can all see, I love Reed alums. Can you all see the trident that is hanging in the back of my office? Made for me by a Reed alum whom I led on a trip to Sicily a couple of years ago, who lives in Portland. So anyway, any of you who like making ancient weapons, just you know where to send them. So anyway, I'd like to address the first question about how we're training students. So it wasn't in my biography, but before I came to Reed, I also taught at Bowdoin College and I taught at the University of Iowa. And one of the things that really shocked me when I came to Reed was the fact that so many students thought that it was the natural conclusion, right, to Reed education, that they were going to go on and become academics. And that struck me as completely bizarre because I was a Brown undergrad, and out of my graduating class of classics, I think there were 14 majors and 3 of us became professors. And I always thought that was highly unusual. And I have to say it concerned me a lot because even in a good year, even when things were better in our field, a good year meant maybe in my field of ancient history, like the year I got my job at Reed, it was the only job in the US that year. Okay. So I was deeply troubled by the fact that we had so many students who thought that if they didn't go into academia, something was wrong with them. So our department, I think since I've been here since 2002, has done a lot of work to encourage students to consider different, a whole variety of career paths. And in fact, Zoom, this is going to sound odd to you, but Zoom has been our friend, because now this year we're going to actually have a series of Zoom talks from Reed alums to talk about the different careers that they've gone into. We don't have to fly people in. I mean, this has actually made life easy in some ways. So I would say that things have really changed. For us, we're not called classics anymore, by the way. We're GLAM now, Greek, Latin, and Ancient Mediterranean Studies. Anyone who has questions for me, I'm happy to answer about that. But I would say very few of our students actually express interest in going on into academia. And personally, I think it would be irresponsible, morally irresponsible, to encourage our students to go on, because things are really terrible in the academy. As bad as they were when I was on the job market, they are even worse. So we have students, again, who are really going into a variety of fields. And what we're trying to do is encourage them. And Reed now has, the Center for Life Beyond Reed, which I think is a big help in guiding students to a variety of careers. So do you want me to go on about diversity, or do you want me to stop there? John, thoughts?
Well, just as you choose, we'll be interested in how the humanities program has evolved in recent years, and maybe going back.
That's a huge question. So I'll get to the other one about diversity. I mean, classics is inherently diverse. We're an interdisciplinary department. I'm the ancient historian. We now have an archaeologist. If that is not cool, I don't know what is. Reed for years was very heavily focused on ancient literature and language, but we are now a full, classics program, or GLAM, because we do history, archaeology, language, and lit. But one thing I will say is that we have two new major lines. One is classics, Greek and Latin, which is much more focused on language and literature, but we now have another one, which is called HAM, which is the history and archaeology of the ancient Mediterranean. And this has allowed us to create closer connections with history, religion, art history, anthropology, etc. And I would say it hasn't necessarily affected my research. The thing that really affected my research is teaching, and I say this with all sincerity, I learned so much from being in the classroom that being in the classroom it's a symbiotic relationship with my research. I get all kinds of ideas when I'm teaching. Too many. I have a whole list of things I would like to continue publishing on that I'd have to live to be like 150 perhaps to get to them. So I don't think it's really changed what we do per se, because we've always been interdisciplinary. So those are my thoughts.
Well, maybe let's move on to David and Jamie in turn, and then we'll see where it goes between the three of you, and then with the alums who are here.
Yeah, well, Ellen just raised so many points that my mind was going off in lots of different directions. I'm not sure which way to go now. Well, one about the mission, I guess the first question was about the mission of Reed College. I'm not sure that it has changed that much. And it could be back in your day that most, or at least the perception was that most students were planning on going on into academia. And so in a way we could be considered like a trade school in a way, like we were training you to take up this profession of being academics. But I don't know if that was true then, especially if you take into account like the attrition rate back then, the number of people who actually just came to Reed and they went on to do other things, but without graduating Reed. Like, so when I think about the people that I know who are not older than I am that are Reed alums, I know several, almost none of them are actually in academics. And the paths that they took were so interesting and so meandering, and where they ended up, like sometimes what they do, maybe it didn't have a name really, as a formal, like I see Tim Rowan there actually, and his wife, Patty McRae, I know them, and I know other people in the Reed community who have they've done all these interesting things.
Yeah.
And so we weren't, training them to do that, right? And right now, also, like if I think about the people I talk to in my students, even the math majors, well, we still do a good job of training people to go to graduate school. We have those people. We don't keep very good track of where people end up. But I think the mission is pretty much, it's not like I feel like I'm training them for some kind of job. I think the idea is just, the idea that if you have a broad liberal education, that's going to influence where you go after, what path you take in life, and hopefully, some rewarding way. Yeah, there is that question of attrition though. That's, like I've got friends who are Reed alums who went just for a couple of years and then did other things. That's a big change, I would say, a huge change. Actually, since the time I arrived at Reed, that there's much more support for students. Yeah, the Gray Fund. It's hard to kind of express how much that has changed.
Yeah.
And so now I guess, I don't know what the numbers are. Actually, I was just talking with a student. I have a student I'm doing research with this summer. We were talking this morning and I told her I was going to be on this panel, but that was when she was telling me it's more like 80%, but I was thinking it was even higher than that, the percentage of people that graduate. Yeah, maybe I have lots of stuff we could talk about, but I'll just maybe say,
Pass the talking stick to Jamie maybe, and back and forth a bit.
Yeah, well, thanks for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to see you all. My timeline with Reed is maybe comparatively short compared to some of you, and so I came to, as John said, I came to Reed in 2004, and so I'll, maybe my comments will be in the context of maybe what's changed since then, and maybe I can project back a little bit based on my own non-Reed experiences as to what was going on in academics before that. I guess I feel like, like Dave said, this sort of mission of educating students and sending them to grad school, I think we still very much believe in that. Of course, I would say that the majority of our students don't go to grad school, but they, maybe the majority are at least thinking about grad school at some point, and a significant minority do go on to graduate school. And I think that we, as a faculty, I think we're very proud of that, and we think that's a very valuable thing. I'm a little sad to see Ellen discussing the distress in the humanities. That makes me sad. I think in math and maybe some of the STEM fields, things are better, but still kind of ridiculously competitive in some ways. I mean, we're going to be running a faculty search for a new faculty member next year, and we're likely to get 700 or 800 applicants for a single position. So that's kind of part of that is sort of our unique situation of being a good liberal arts college in a sort of urban setting, which is kind of rare. But yeah, it's and that competitiveness sort of transfers, I think, down to undergraduates and even students in high school. I mean, I think among the I think our students at Reed are they're sort of, compared to even 15 years ago when I started at Reed, they're sort of forced to grow up faster, I think, if they want to be competitive for grad school. So maybe 15 years ago you could have put a good grad school application together on the basis of good grades in your upper level math courses, but maybe now you sort of more essential that you participate in summer research programs, and maybe you have a publication with one of your professors, or I think it's and students have really risen to that. I think I see a lot more students that are sort of very independent minded. I mean, I guess it's always sort of been that way at Reed, but I think students are they come in often with very interesting independent ideas about how they want to navigate through their Reed experience. And that also connects to the question of the interdisciplinary nature of things. I think when I started at Reed, we had one computer science faculty member who was a member of the math department. And now we have a department of computer science, which comprises 5 faculty members. Those faculty members also have connections with other departments. So we have a computational biologist who's housed in the biology department, but she is very active in her collaborations with some of the computer science and statistics faculty. Also, statistics has grown. We only had Alvin Jones when I was here when I was first started, but now we have two tenure track lines and maybe a third. And we also have, I think, 2 visiting positions in statistics. So, these sort of disciplines that surround mathematics have sort of kind of greatly expanded and also made connections with related fields like biology and other sciences, psychology, neuroscience is one of our computer science scientists who's been around for 3 or 4 years, Mark Hopkins, is in machine learning. So that's a great, that's a field of great interest to a lot of our students for many reasons. So I guess I feel like, math sort of has this reputation for being kind of isolated from other disciplines, and I think for good reason. I mean, I think there's a certain type of math that can sort of only be done with sort of pie in the sky, abstract, thinking unrelated to anything sort of human or connected to other subjects. But I'm also very proud that the mathematics department is playing a role. Even those of us who think mostly about pure math, we're playing a role in sort of connecting the people who are in fields like neuroscience and computational biology and so on. So I think that's one of my own research interests is in quantum computing. So there's a sort of a new type of computer logic that uses the principles of quantum mechanics to do computations faster and maybe more securely than could be done with classical information theory. So I kind of interact with a lot of computer science scientists and physicists in that realm. So it's kind of nice to see that type of thing happening in the STEM and mathematics fields. One of the things that you realize is, if you look at the history of academics, is that things that are considered interdisciplinary today may, in the near future, be their own type of department. I mean, like like biology is a good example of that, which was, started as an interdisciplinary thing, but now we consider it as a single subject. And I think computer science has been, over the last 50 years, they've sort of had the evolution into their own type of department, their own type of field of learning. And so who knows, like in 50 years, like things seem to be changing fairly fast. And so who knows what other types of things. I should add, in closing, maybe that the decision to enlarge computer science and make it its own department was a fairly slow thing at Reed, and it was a very thoughtful thing. I think that there was a lot of discussion about how does computer science fit into Reed, fit in more generally into a liberal arts setting. We don't have engineering, obviously, at Reed, and there's some sense maybe that engineering somehow doesn't fit with what we do in a liberal arts kind of environment. But somehow computer science, the conversation sort of somehow resulted in there being an expansion of computer science and becoming its own department.
Jamie, if I can just say take a moment, you went exactly where I wanted you to go without my even nodding in that direction. That's wonderful. And I wonder, David, can you add some things and then bring things back around to Ellen with regard to the interactions with other disciplines and departments and in the ways in which all of that gets applied by students after they graduate.
I don't know, that's a tall order to do all of that. Yeah, Jamie's, I was also going to talk about that history. Like when I first got here was just, there were mathematicians and they had fairly recently just hired a statistician who was very mathematical statistician. And who also taught math courses, but that's been a big change in math. Most recently, this huge kind of exponential growth in the interest in mathematical sciences. Yeah, and so yeah, and math grew into almost 3 departments. So when I would go talk to the committees on campus about hiring and stuff, it was very hard to explain. Well, the mathematicians don't know statistics. We could teach maybe an intro course, but not very well. The same thing with computer science. And so that took a long time. And then pretty much we had these 3 departments, kind of math, statistics, and computer science. And yeah, so CS just, Jamie, when did the department get instated? Was that last year? Did they become the first? Or it was within the last couple of years
ago,
they
yeah.
first became a department. Yeah, and Reed is very conservative. I underline this with other people there, or at least, well, maybe not. Recently, there's been just like a dam is broken or something, and there's been a lot of change. But most of the time I've been here, to get any kind of movement was in the program. We recently changed the group requirements for the whole college. I was not happy with the group requirements when I got here, and 28 years later, almost nothing had changed. But somehow, with new people coming in with new ideas, they were able to push things through and finally get some change. And you can see it in the humanities program also, which I'm really interested to hear about. So math is diversified in that way. But also other fields have changed, like Jamie was saying, biology has become kind of part of it has become kind of an information science, and it's very mathematical. So, there was an article not too long ago in our kind of main journal in the AMS about how biology is the new physics for mathematics. Having lots of interesting new kind of problems that force mathematicians and data scientists to think in new ways. Yeah, so now with my students, maybe I can mention one other thing is, like Jamie said, we have a job. We're going to go on the market next year to hire a new mathematician, and there will be at least 700 applicants, I think, and many of them just astounding. You look at them and you actually feel like retiring because to make way for them, they're just so good. And so when I think of my students who are expressing interest in going on to graduate school and going into mathematics, okay, yeah, but you have to want to do that for your own reasons. And so one thing I do find myself doing with my students is at least advertising statistics it's a very mathematical field. There's a huge amount of interest, and you can easily get a job. So when we go on the market for a statistician, there's an order of magnitude fewer number of people applying for those jobs. Anyway, those are some ideas.
Well, Ellen, take a turn and.
Well, again, our department, I mean, I've sort of said what I have to say about mean, our department has really changed since any of you would have been at Reed, in the sense that
Mhm.
we, as I said, we have 2 major lines, and the students, thesis topics, students always did a range of topics in our department, but now they can do more archaeological work, more art historical work. And we had something very cool. Well, we're hoping it will work, which is a student doing what we call an alt classical thesis, which is a student doing a thesis that is linking chemistry and classics and glam. This is a student who's interested in archaeology, or what we call archaeometry, where he's looking at chemical compositions. For example, people work on like the chemical compositions of clay or of the ink, et cetera. So that's going to be the first one that we've ever done. You know, because I personally think that that it's really important for students to see the connections between these departments. And I'm sure you could never have imagined any kind of collaboration between chemistry and my discipline, which I think is fabulous.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great. Let me bring Carrie into the picture, and let's field some of the things in the chat, and also give a chance to people who just raise a hand, and let's have some give and take from
Yeah,
the audience now.
I've collected a couple questions from Murray in the chat, which I can read. The first one is, in 1984-ish, there was a substantial change in the content of the humanities courses. Are present faculty aware of this? If they are, is there a sense of what the reasoning was? And does the reasoning for the change still apply?
Okay, I sort of have to be the one to take this on. And Mary, I have to say that what you're going to be hearing from me is one position. And there's a lot of I'm trying to find the nicest way of saying this, but Hume has created a lot of division. There are a lot of very strong feelings about where Hume has been, and everyone is very aware of what happened in 1984. You're talking to someone who was on 1, 2, 3, 4 committees since I've been at Reed to revamp Hume. And I was on one a couple of years ago where we were thinking of actually doing something pretty unusual, and instead of making it place or time-based, making it theme-based, which and there were faculty who immediately said absolutely not, which I was disappointed about. You know, Hume, I mean, I think one of the problems is that Hume, so I also should make it clear, part of my answer arises from the fact that I have been asked to, I've been paid actually to go to several other institutions in this country to review what are their equivalent of Hume 110. And I've written reports, and the humanities really is in a very tough position right now, because these courses in many ways are asked to do too many things, if that makes some sense. You have people who feel like this is our chance to make sure students are thinking about social justice issues, or that students understand race and gender. And then you have other people who are like, no, I mean, when I came to Reed, I loved Hume because I thought what Hume did, and I haven't taught it now in a couple of years, but Hume to me meant that you guys knew how to write when you graduated from Reed, and you knew how to read when you graduated from Reed, and that you could open up a text and find the best evidence, and that you could intelligently and articulately argue with someone, right? On an issue. I still think that those to me are the big, skills that one gains from Hume. You could read a whole bunch of different texts. Which text you choose, or which period of time that you're focusing on. I mean, I'm not wedded to it being the ancient world. I love the texts we do, but there could be other periods as well. I think what concerns me is that, in Hume, like right now at Reed, you have 40 odd people who are connected with this course. You have those who are in the course teaching it. You have people like me who are not teaching it. And we've had meetings which have been, shall we say, rancorous, as the best way of describing it, because we don't agree. I mean, and I am, I'm a pretty outspoken person. I'm known to be pretty blunt. It's just how it's never personal. I just say what I think is going on. And
That's greatly appreciated, by the way.
yeah, Dave knows this very well about me, but but we've been at meetings where, I mean, it's become very personal, and you have to remember that the current culture wars have played a part where Hume is right now, right? We had protests. We had protests where I can tell you this was horrifying to me. I'm a Jewish woman, okay? I was called a white supremacist. It was it was horrifying. And because I work on ancient Sparta, so I said, guess what? I'm not giving another lecture ever again if I'm going to have students say things like that about me. It was upsetting and horrifying. And the faculty have responded to the course. And I don't really disagree with so the present course now has a kind of weird mishmash of Greek stuff in the fall. And then they do Mexico City and the Harlem Renaissance in the spring. And I've never taught the syllabus, so it's sort of unfair for me to weigh in, but I will tell you that a lot of my colleagues have loved teaching the Mexico City and Harlem Renaissance material. I think the problem is the course has no coherence, and I care about coherence. I feel like there should be through lines and coherence through the year. And frankly, the fall semester fills me with rage. So I'm going to be very quiet because I am the ancient historian at Reed. I'm the one who actively publishes on Greece, and I don't like the syllabus. I don't think the syllabus in any way reflects. It's supposed to be on Athens, and I personally don't think it does the work it's supposed to do. But again, we take votes, and there are all kinds of reasons why the syllabus looks the way it does. And I don't know where it's going. I will probably be back in the course next year or the year after. But what I will say is that when you talk to individual students, even though they may find problems with the syllabus as it exists now, I taught a whole bunch of first years in Latin 110 this spring. They still love their conferences. They love their individual conference leaders. They still learn to read. They still learn to write. So Hume just remains a battleground, but it's not just at Reed. This is because of systemic issues going on, not just in the country, but in the academy. I went to a whole conference at Stanford about 6 years ago on the crisis of such courses. So we're not alone. And yes, everybody's very well aware what happened in '84.
Oh, wait, Ellen.
Trust me.
Wait,
Sorry to go on and on and on. Yeah.
wait a second. What happened in 1984, Ellen?
Well, actually, so basically you had 80. So I've got to be very careful here because there have been so many changes. But there was, if 84, if I'm correct, was that the year where they went to 3 tracks? Murray, am I correct on that score? I'm trying to even remember whether that was.
I don't know what happened on campus. There was a major change in the syllabus.
Yeah.
And basically politics and technology dropped out. And it became much more of the kind of humanities course you'd see at other universities, focusing on literature and art and a bit of history.
Right. But if I'm also right, I think the scale of it, the time also changed. I mean, Hume
there was coming and going, one course, 2 courses, 3 courses.
Yes.
In the second year.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's the whole point. I mean, this course should not be static. But what happens, one of the problems with the course, but this is true for a lot of us, is time gets invested in the syllabus, right? Sure. So when you then say to people, hey, I know that you just spent a whole summer reading all these, like Dave and I were talking about this with Zoom, right? We spent a lot of the year working on things that we may, on materials we may never have to use again. I'm hoping to use a lot of my materials, but it's very hard. Once people get invested in one syllabus, it's very hard to change it because there's that investment of time. And there are other reasons why people get invested. But if you look at our reviews, we always went back and looked at all the other times the course had changed, and it will change again. And listen, I may shock you. I'm one of these people. I shouldn't even admit this to you. Are any of you going to be mad if I make a really bold statement here? Any of you going to throw things at me via Zoom? I'm one of the people who really thinks in many ways a one-size-fits-all course will not work for Reed anymore. I just don't think it does. I personally would go to first-year seminars. throw things at me if you will. That would be my personal take. So, said it.
I think part of the change was that the history faculty seems to have dropped out.
No,
And
there's still quite a number. There's still several history faculty in the course. And remember, I'm an ancient historian. I'm not in history, but my history courses are cross-listed with theirs. So
Murray, do you want to just ask your calculus question? And then I think
My
if
second
other people
question?
have questions, just unmute.
well, the second question is on similar question on math. When we all came, the introductory math course was developed the real number system. And calculus, if you were interested, I think was in the junior year. And that isn't what most universities do, and it's no longer what Reed does. And my sense is now calculus is up front, and if you have a math theory course, it comes later. I think I understand why calculus is so much more important through a wide range of disciplines. But I'm wondering how that change occurred. Same question, really. And in retrospect, what do you think of the results? How does it fit with the rest of the curriculum, including the math curriculum?
Jamie, do you want to take that?
Well, I think you probably were there closer to the transition than me.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so when I came, it was very much we were constructing the real number system. I have a very kind of cartoonish picture of the history of math at Reed, but I think like there was the Griffin years where it was more kind of like engineering, kind of calculus, kind of like how do you do this stuff? And then there was a new generation that came in that was just leaving, well, was just kind of reached its culmination when I arrived, which was this very much more a theoretical, construct the number system, but teach people how to read and write mathematics formally. And when I first got here, what I was told was, there were people that came in and didn't have any interest in mathematics, and then they saw what mathematics was really about in this course and became interested in it. But my supposition or my suspicion was that, yeah, there were probably a lot of people who were interested in mathematics, and then they saw this and they decided they were no longer interested. So, mathematics for me is more about solving problems, and that's the fun of it. And then when you learn this formality, that gives you the tools to do that. But the essence is that those problems. So more recently, so that course that you're talking about still more or less has morphed in this, it exists. There's a beginning calculus course, which many students have already kind of done in high school.
Right.
But then in the first year, there is this course where we more or less do this course where you construct the number system. It's a little bit different, but we've also supplemented that with a beginning requirement actually for the major where you actually take a problem, or take a course that is more focused on solving problems. And also instead of continuous stuff like calculus, it focuses on more discrete stuff, which is, it's always been important, but it's more maybe clearly important now, how things like networks and these discrete objects in mathematics are, how those are important, an essential part of mathematics. Yeah.
That's very helpful.
Yeah.
And the third question you've actually both suggested. I don't think I remember anything like a curriculum committee for the whole college. And it sounds like what you're saying is you have groups focused on different groups of courses, groups of faculty that settle these issues, like what to teach.
Well, departments are in charge of departments. No department tells any. Can you imagine me telling Dave what to do in math? That would be a horror. But maybe, Dave, maybe we could try it. We could like a flip,
Yeah, sure. I'm ready to be told what to do.
And you could tell me what to do with Greek history, that'd be fun.
Right. But divisions used to have an important role in this.
Well, I think I'll speak for our division. No, I mean, this is Lit and Lang, and we do talk, but not about individual like how courses are taught in the departments. That doesn't come up. No.
So
But
that's
what you were talking about earlier was that the humanities is a much
Yeah.
bigger thing than a departmental.
Right.
But that's the humanities committee, Ellen has said.
Faculty. It's not a
Yeah.
committee. It's the
No,
whole shebang.
faculty that do it, yeah.
Yeah.
This is a related question. I did a book on faculty governance and looked at the issues of staffing things like in humanities classes. And you have a 1-to-10 ratio still, I think, or is it 1-to-12? For student faculty to students. If you do, then of course, faculty assigned to the class have to correspond to students enrolling in the class. Does that change from year to year?
I don't think we understand the question yet.
Well, let me put it a different way. At the University of Chicago, there's a fixed 1-to-10 ratio.
Mhm.
So they have to have a flexible way of adding and subtracting faculty every year when they see the incoming class and who's enrolled. Now, it's a required course, so it's not that unpredictable, but they
Oh, you
still
mean
try to keep that ratio.
Oh, for Hume 110, yes. I mean, since I've been at Reed, I think we had a pretty high enrollment a couple years ago. And I think that there were like 17 or 18 per Hume conference, which is
Oh, okay.
high. Next year, God knows. I mean, looking at our current numbers, how big they're going to be. But that often involves then hiring. I mean, we're doing something which Reed has hired. They're not necessarily, well, they're like adjuncts,
Okay.
to teach in Hume 110. It's the only part of the college, unless I'm mistaken, where we really have that practice.
Yeah, so my understanding is that next year we might end up having too many students.
Way too many.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
very hard to predict what was happening at these times. And I don't know, most colleges like us don't have that problem, the opposite problem.
What do you mean the opposite problem?
Well, I mean, they don't have enough students applying.
They don't have enough.
They can't fill
Yeah.
their classes.
Yeah,
Yeah, and in mathematics, well, there's just been this surge of interest in the mathematical sciences, like I said before. So it's been very difficult to cope with so many students, and so many sections of classes. And many of them, are required courses. If you want to go into science, often you have to be taking these courses in your first year.
right.
Yeah. It's been
We cap our classes at 24 students, and I think when I started at Reed, I remember numbers like 13 and 11 and 15 and 17, but now I haven't seen those numbers in years. I think almost all the courses are pushing up against that 24 person cap, and some of them, it's up to you as an instructor if you want to let additional students into your class. And of course, students are they have compelling stories sometimes, and they come to you and say, they convince you to add them to your class. So so it's we do feel like if you're trying to give students a good one-on-one personalized introduction to proofs class, like Dave was talking about how this version of the old math, what was it, 101?
101.
Yeah, that still exists, probably in what I would call a saner or more mild version. That course still exists, and if you want to really teach the students well, I think it's a lot harder to do that when you're in the upper 20s than if you're in the teens.
And that descendant class is proofs, introduction to proofs?
Well, I called it that. It's kind of introduction to analysis is what we call it.
That's a great idea.
But that's sort of a code name, I think, for introduction to mathematical reason within the context of analysis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've talked too much.
Well, maybe just other people of the alumni here, if you just raise your hand in the screen and speak up with a question or a comment based on what's happened so far. I just think this has been a wide-ranging and wonderful conversation, and let's keep it going.
I really wish that we were the audience and this group I see before me were the panel.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I can attest to the fact that they have lots of very, very cool stories. Go ahead. Is it Lolene?
Yes.
Oh, we can't hear you.
That's it. And Dan also after Jolene.
I don't think she's muted. I think, Jolene, I think you just need to speak more loudly into the computer.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
While she's doing that, a question for reserve. How have you been doing online teaching? Now that you bring it up.
Yeah.
Well, I will say, it's interesting. Some of my classes, the language and the lit classes were actually relatively easy
Yeah.
in the sense that we weren't really doing anything fundamentally different, I mean, in some ways, I found Zoom exhausting, but one of the cool things I could do, I taught Homer in the spring with book 9 of the Odyssey. Can you imagine reading the Cyclops episode in the original? It is fabulous. Anyway,
Oh my.
what was really cool about it was I had the text on the screen.
Yeah.
There's this thing called the TLG, and when students would have an issue, I would click and we could talk about the full. As I said to Dave, Zoom actually made some old dogs. I'm not that old. I'm turning 57, but learned some new tricks. So my Latin class, I did a flipped classroom where I created 60 brand new lectures for the second half of the year for Latin. So the students would go and watch the lecture the night before, and we'd actually spend the whole class just working on sentences.
Yeah, good.
And it was so successful that I'm still going to do this even when we're back in person, because they loved having those lectures. They said they could go back over and over and over again and watch me go through grammar. So in some ways I found it horribly exhausting, but in other ways, it really forced me to think about pedagogy in some new and interesting ways. So I'd like to look at the silver lining over what was a very big, dark cloud.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Come on, guys. What do you guys think?
Well, I did a similar thing. I'm used to teaching, have a 50-minute lecture where students can interrupt and we just talk, and then I have some problem sets during the week. But this last year, we couldn't do that. I was not going to have a 50-minute lecture, on Zoom. So I made shorter 20-minute taped lectures on the material with kind of a built-in quiz. I wrote hundreds of pages of text that was like reading material that supported they were supposed to read that before watching the lecture. And then I created problems for people to do in class. So most of class time was spent, I would put in Zoom breakout rooms. We had like these shared blackboards for each group. And I would go from one group to another, small groups, and they would work on the problems. And, I would talk to them. It was very interesting because, I really get to learn where every student is at.
Yeah.
I discovered so many things, there were certain points where I'd always assumed students could easily follow along, where they actually were quite confused at those points. Yeah, it was exhausting just preparing all that material. And of course, Zoom, you get tired of just having people that are only 1 inch tall.
And
That was
rectangular.
I'm very much looking forward to seeing actual people. How much of that kind of technique of pedagogy I'll include when I go back? I don't think I'm going to have a flipped classroom when I go back. I think it'll be more lectures, but Yeah, I've got to think about that this summer.
Yeah, I taught in person in a
Oh, that's
in a
right.
tent.
Yeah.
Under a tent with a mask on,
Oh, goodness.
with
Outside, right? Yeah.
yep, with students spread out. It was and I also had a camera pointed at me that was being broadcast to China and other faraway points. Students getting up in the middle of the night, the local time,
Yeah, sure.
to watch me in a mask under a tent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I had
Matt-
one student in Hawaii, and he was always fun to look at because he had a very lush background behind him, which looked like it was one of these fake Zoom backgrounds, but it was actually real palm.
Real.
But yeah, it was an awful lot of work. I'd say like I feel like I got like 80% of the results with 150% of the effort.
Oh,
Imagine this class, so when they have their reunion, you
Oh
know,
my God.
like if their 40th year away, I mean, this will definitely be one of the weirdest
Mhm.
read experiences ever, I think. Yeah.
Speaking on behalf of the alumni programs and annual fund office, we are very, very interested to see how that goes, especially with the graduating class from last year.
Yeah, I have to say, do right by them. My daughter graduated from Grinnell last year and they've done nothing. And as a parent, that makes me not so good.
That's such a shame to hear. Yeah, we sent them last year. We sent them a box of
Oh,
lots
they
of.
did too, but
Did they do that? Oh, good. Yeah, but staying in touch and offering lots of resources has been a big push for us, especially career resources for them.
Ellen, you should tell them what to do.
are you suggesting I'm bossy? That's really hurting my
No,
feelings.
no. I really appreciate it. But if you have some ideas, maybe, right?
No, it's sad because then this year's graduating class, like last year, I don't know how Jamie and Dave felt. It was so sad. You know, our majors, we actually had some of the best theses ever. I had one of the best theses I've ever had at Reed. And we bought the students each a book. And I had to go deliver. My student was like off some guy in some remote part of Portland. And I felt like it was a crime show. Like I drive up in my car and I get out my mask and I hand this bag to the student and the student scurries off. It looked like it had been like a drug bust. I mean, the whole thing was just really depressing and strange, you know? And I feel bad because these students all worked really, really hard and you can't really replace graduation. I mean, right? Like my daughter got a job right after, like what's the point now? But it's just, there's something very sad about it, you know?
Could you describe that thesis? That was so good.
Oh, this was a student. I'm going to sound like a one-trick pony, but you've all read the Odyssey. Have you all read the Odyssey, Homer? I mean, a lot of you read the Odyssey.
Mm.
So I had a student who, and this is Reed. This is where I read, and I agree with Dave. That's why the alums always really impress me because it's where I see people's minds go, like minds work. And the alums I've met who've taken these really interesting paths because they're just really interesting thinkers and people. So my student was really interested. She noticed a pattern in the Greek when every time Penelope, Odysseus's wife, would come into the midst of the men, she would lean on this thing, like this, whatever this thing was. And she ended up doing research. And then what she ended up showing was, in a sense, she studied the whole idea of being a wife, this very particular vantage point of support networks for wives throughout the work. And she ended up writing a thesis that was completely original. It was brilliant. And she was just a joy to work with. And we didn't miss a beat, even though Zoom came in. You know, and again, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I just found that very sad that that I couldn't be there to be with her family and to just say to them, your daughter is remarkable. And to, you know, to have that wonderful interaction, because it's not just for the kids, it's you and their parents, right?
Yeah.
You know? And so anyway, it was brilliant. We've all had theses like this, but they don't come along all that often.
Just
Party.
with reference to the Odyssey, 1961 was an Odyssey year. You know, the next year was an Iliad year.
Oh,
It
ew.
made a difference.
The Iliad, like how many times can you hear about people being pierced and having their genitals pierced?
I never did read the
Guts
Iliad.
pouring out of them. It just gets a little boring. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's just my thoughts.
It's very heartening because there's a battle, there's a battle in the alumni programs office about whether people will understand references to the Odyssey because the Iliad has been read so much.
You know,
And
if
I'm
they
very
don't-
firm on the side
If
that
they
they don't.
don't, refer them to me because I teach it it's my first text that I do in my Greek history course. You are all invited to come to my first day of actually my third day of Greek history.
I
Talk
love
about the
that.
Odyssey.
That's perfect. There is a question in the chat, Ellen, for you. An alumnus, Diskin Clay, a 60s graduate, have they had any presence in your courses?
You know, that's so interesting. Have I ever taught? Not in mine per se. But we know Diskin Clay and Jenny Strauss Clay. We know them very well. Jenny Strauss Clay I think Jenny gave a talk at some point. I'm trying to remember when. And I know that she has featured on at least one of my syllabi. But more of my stuff was on that. But his not. But we're very, very aware that we have some famous classicists.
Yeah.
From that era.
Diskin and Jenny are both very strong in my memory. And I have corresponded a little bit with Jenny. Diskin died just a few years ago, and such colorful people. And I took, when Diskin went to, let's say Diskin and Jenny both went to the south of France and made a vacancy in the arrangements that Kathy Halban had with Jenny. So I had to take Jenny's place in a Woodstock apartment. And Bob Scott was another part of that that triangle. We had a wonderful year, and then Kathy Halban didn't come back from Christmas vacation because she broke her leg skiing in Switzerland. So then we needed another person, and that's when my Bob Scott's friend Toby Gersten came in, and that led eventually to one of those Reed marriages. So hope that sort of thing still happens around Reed. Jolene.
Yeah, I apologize earlier for not figuring out where my microphone was.
Here we are.
My question, well, I recently acquired a current catalog of Reed offerings. And as you talk about the proliferation of departments, I can't imagine how somebody can complete Reed in 4 years. There's so much to do. I mean, do people take 5 years now to take advantage of how many great things are offered?
Too expensive.
I'm sure it is. It's just, I found it staggering what's available.
You guys want to weigh in? I've talked too much.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's there's so many things, and I think especially some of these students that come in and maybe they're interested in they've heard about machine learning or something, and they want to sort of pursue a computer science major, but they also kind of want to have a focus on that particular part of computer science. But of course, doing that involves like learning a lot of the mathematics and other things that go into the computer science. So it's really kind of I think it's really is obviously like if 5 years would be a great thing, but from a practical point of view, I don't think we can really do that.
Well, it is an embarrassment of riches, I think, available.
Yeah, I think one thing is that students are with all the resources online, students and with the independence that students have, Reed students have. You know, a lot of them, we can just send them, you know, say,
Yeah.
hey, learn about, in order to learn about machine learning, you need to learn this piece of math. So you just send the students to that, to
Learn.
whatever Wikipedia page, and they can kind of absorb. Maybe they don't absorb it at the level that they would if they had a full course on the
Yeah.
math, but they can certainly absorb a lot of things at a level that's what they need to kind of progress in their chosen discipline.
It is a trick to be an advisor, you know, for a new student. Like, how are you going to chart your way through Reed, given your interests? And often that can be difficult. There are certain kind of fundamental things, like basically, roughly, if you're in the sciences, you have to start pursuing that thing right at the beginning, or you kind of miss the boat. But my general understanding is that some of the, like, you know, non-science disciplines, you know, you have a little bit more leeway. You don't have to start on your first year.
Not for us. We're there too, because of the 2 languages.
I see.
Speak to that. I was class of 62, and I noticed that nobody ever drops into physics. It's just not possible because of requirements.
Yeah.
Dan.
Yeah, I had a question that David mentioned. I haven't seen Reed in years. And you mentioned a change in the dropout rate and the more, I guess, faculty participation with the students to make sure that doesn't happen. I wonder if you could expand on that.
I don't know. So I think it's just an institutional kind of idea that they didn't want this to happen, for half the students to drop out, and they just started creating support for that. So there are people in the administration who are basically, there's a whole student support group in college.
Yeah, it was really sink or swim in my day, and we had the intransitive verb to attrit.
To attrit, okay.
Oh, God. That's awful.
Well, the attrition rate when I was there was huge. I think in physics, I was in physics, and I think we started with a class of 92. A lot of them were not physics majors, but we ended with a class of 12. So the dropout rate was just enormous. And I guess what you're saying is it's not the faculty participation so much, but you actually have a staff that counsels the students?
No, I don't. Can I jump in here? I think it's a combination. I would say, I mean, Reed is still really rigorous. I mean, compared to other schools, I mean, what Dave said, you know, the education that we're giving our students is incredibly rigorous. I think what's different is we're giving them more scaffolding, if that makes some sense. And that's not just staff. That is faculty. That's faculty.
There was almost no support in
Yeah.
my day.
You know, I mean, you know, listen, I'll be honest with you. I think there are times we have too much scaffolding, but that's not Reed. That's current students who come from high schools where, you know, there are these elaborate rubrics. And I'm like, hey, maybe you want to go off and figure out your thesis without me having to hold your hand. I mean, there's a little more too much in that. But I would say that, you know, every faculty member I know, including my comrades here, spend immense amount of time with their students. I mean, office hours and, you know, again, just to me, the faculty really are there to help the students, but it's not just staff, but we do have staff. We have a lot of counseling that goes on at Reed now, right? To make sure that students are here, that they should be here, that they're in a good place, physically, mentally, intellectually. So I think the faculty play a very big role in that. It's not
It
just
could
staff.
also be that we have a lot more students to choose from coming in.
Yeah.
I believe that the economics of the situation have changed tremendously. And when we were at Reed, I mean, you could consider students disposable. If you lost half of them at the end of the first year, Reed survived, okay, but colleges are in a very different place now.
Mhm.
They cannot afford to lose students.
Absolutely.
But the dropout rate wasn't really a dropout rate. It was a transfer out rate. Most of the people just found something they wanted to do. They didn't want to bother with the other stuff, and they went to Berkeley or Washington or other places, mostly Berkeley and Washington.
Barbara? Yes?
Yeah, I had to unmute. So I'm class of 64, which in terms of student support and curricula is not that different from your class. We read the Iliad. My sense was that except for a couple of notoriously bad professors who didn't last, I got plenty of academic support.
Yeah.
The academic support, the support from the faculty in terms of office hours and encouragement and responses on Hume papers and all that stuff, that was there.
Yeah.
At least for me. Now, I didn't take anthro. I knew better than to go there. But the other support was just non-existent. You know, we had Jack Dudman and Ann Shepard, bless their hearts. That
Right.
was
was it.
that was student support.
Right.
And so people just got lost.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem to happen so much. I was on campus quite a bit 15 to 5 years ago when I lived in Portland, and there was a whole bunch more stuff going on. There was Gray Fund, there were some multicultural stuff. There was just all kinds of support going on, and I thought that the students were way much better off for that. And I thought that explained a lot of people sticking around. Murray, it's true, people who attrited transferred, but that didn't make it any less painful. The reasons they were leaving Reed wasn't so much that they found something they wanted to dive into that Reed didn't have. It was just that Reed just couldn't provide people with the support that they needed. You had to be so strong, I guess, before you got there.
Yeah, self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Which is not something one usually is at that age.
That is really interesting for me to hear. Yeah, in my mind, it was the story that back then it was just more acceptable and people would leave to do other things that cut their mind. But you're saying that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, the major
Sink or swim.
the major product of Reed was Reed dropouts.
Yeah.
Far more people dropped out than actually graduated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way as Barbara. I think, the faculty was there for academic stuff, but the other stuff
Wasn't there.
you were on your own. And,
Yes.
and I think a lot of people that dropped out did not drop out to go to other colleges or universities. They just burned out.
Yeah, so that's something that really did happen over my time at Reed, that change. I remember the arguments on the faculty floor, and one of the words used was neo-nannyism. Like some of the older faculty, they said, we're here, just students are adults. We don't need to fiddle around with their personal lives or that kind of stuff or their social lives. We're here just to deliver their academic kind of information. That's our job. So that was kind of the argument.
And one of the nice things, again, I'm sure that maybe it existed in your time, but we're given, again, in a normal year, a normal, should we say, non-COVID year, faculty are given money to host students at their house. I've had students over at my house every semester, and you would think it's like the greatest thing. I've always, so completely, but and I think that's really important too. Is forming those kind of bonds. So it's not simply so let me be clear, it's not just faculty giving academic support, it's that other element of what I might call support and or connection, which I think is really important.
Well, that was certainly a part of my experience and many other students. We had the faculty and students partied together to some extent.
We don't
And there were
party.
also regular classes. Casper Locher's class and Dan Deegan's class was off campus, but not far off campus. And that's where we met. And there were other examples of the same sort of thing. Casper Locher said once that things got worse when hard drugs came to read, because the faculty and the students couldn't do it together as a rule. And that broke some bonds that were very important for a while. Maybe that still is problematic. I don't know.
No.
I want to agree with Ellen that it was really a key. I was a transfer student like Murray. I had come from Brandeis, so I only spent the last 2 years at Reed. And at Brandeis, I was a great grade getter. I knew how to get good grades, but I knew I didn't know how to think. And I really felt I was going to miss out on this honeymoon moment that society was giving me to learn how to think. And I knew from ice skating, if I didn't fall down, I hadn't tried something new. So I knew I had to get bad grades, and I was caught in a bind. And when I came to Reed, the very big difference for 2 years, I happened to be in chemistry at the time, but we went to evenings at Scotty's house, Arthur Scott. And Locher too, and I went skiing with Marsh Cronin and his family. And so there was a bridge of like, I could secretly see what it was like to be a grown-up. I mean, and in the meantime, I took Middle English. I mean, forget chemistry, as long as I did my independent study, and I could go down a road and stumble and crash and do badly. And even learn that I loved it, even though I wasn't very good at all of that. That was all uniquely possible at Reed for me. So it that's my, that as long as there's something like that, I don't know about support staff or faculty support or nanny, anything. There was a reality show going on if you wanted it. And it's true that there were many who were not self-starters and not self-sufficient, and that was a big missing piece. I didn't happen to have that problem, but I had other things which would not have been addressed or even discovered at another college. So I feel very lucky. 2 years, only 2 years, right?
I systematically talked to, sort of interviewed everyone I knew of who was transferring away, because I was very curious about that. And those who were and those who weren't going to Berkeley or Washington. The other major theme was they felt the people at Reed were too aggressive and combative. And I thought they were just having fun. But there's a difference in what kind of person you are and whether you like that kind of, somebody trying to figure out what you're thinking all the time. And I think that was part of it. And a few people I'm thinking of right now would just rather think for themselves and not be bothered by all that interaction with other people trying to figure out what they were up to. I'm looking at Fritz's expression, and that seems to ring a bell. No?
Thomas Rosen, is your hand up or no?
Go ahead.
Oh, this is Tom Rosen talking. Am I coming through?
Yes.
I don't think so.
Yeah, he said yes.
Oh, yes. Well, I just wanted to make a comment that that the humanities programs in the first year did create wonderful networks of conversing students. And also the fact that we lived on campus and dined together was a very powerful element those first 2 years. And I'm one of the group of my friends that did eventually graduate. But on the other hand, the network of people who did not are significant. And I think that all of them have had relatively successful lives, because when they left Reed, they left for a reason. They knew themselves, they knew the challenges, and they were ready to jump into something else. I think of people like Gary Bernhardt, or Dick Levin, who later had mental difficulties, still is a very powerful figure in the Midwest, trying to organize schizophrenic people, to verify the power of the voice that haunts them. I just think that maybe, I certainly think it's right, Murray, that an awful lot of them came to Berkeley, and there, really chose to connect and to create a life that was more focused on their own values. But I do think the networking at Reed proved incredibly effective among students, as well as linking them to faculty.
And I can see that with the Hume 110 to today. When I have say my senior students over for dinner or something like that, often they'll start talking about what their experience in Hume. And my son, who went off to, he's near the end of graduate school, but when he moved to Boston, he hooked up with a bunch of Reed students. There was a Reed house there, more or less. They weren't all science people, but they had this kind of common thing that, and when I go to visit them, you would hear them, the influence of that common experience. I really valued that.
And I would say, and again, what I would say is that I would agree. I would say that my first, really much of the time I've been at Reed, I have prized that experience, and having, especially, I should tell you this was really amazing during, not getting into too much into politics, but during the election of 2016, the number of former students of mine who, and remember, I published on Thucydides, I published on Herodotus, the number of students I had who wrote to me to talk about what would Thucydides say about what's going on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, was really amazing. I mean, that they were using, not just that they had read this text, but thinking about how this text was making them think at a particular time.
Yeah.
And so there's the beauty. The reason why I was saying that the common, why it may not work anymore is I think we've gotten to the point where the faculty want the course to be and do so many different things. And I think, and you have to also remember something we haven't talked about today, and I hope you guys don't mind, I have to go in a little bit, because our faculty and our students are much more diverse than when you were at Reed. And that's a really good thing for Reed. But I think what that means is that you have a lot of people who are looking at that course for different things. And I think trying to find one course, right, that makes all of those people happy is just becoming much more difficult. Anyway, but yes, I agree though. There is something wonderful, especially with alums, where I led this trip to Sicily, and I took them to I don't know if you guys remember in Thucydides when those Athenians, whom I hate because I'm a Sparta specialist, attacked Sicily and got the crap kicked out of them, and then they were imprisoned in quarries. So we're down in one of these quarries in Syracuse, and I am reciting Thucydides, and all these alums were like, it was bizarre. All these alums were like, oh my God, I remember reading this and it was so powerful. And I remember thinking, God love Reed. Like, how could that ever happen? And all these people are walking past, like, who are these weirdos watching this woman reading out of this text and are like freaking out? Again, a very Reed, amazing, amazing moment.
I can't resist. The other thing that pops up in my memory is at Reed, when a moral question came up, and afterwards among Reedies, the first thing people say is, or one of the things that people are fairly sure to say, what would Kant say about that?
Oh,
How does that fit in the metaphysics of morals?
Right.
And that does not happen with most groups.
Right.
The old guys knew a thing or two.
Barbara?
So I want to ask Carrie, riffing off of what Ellen just said. I was planning to go to Greece with Wally Englert a year ago. Is the alumni office even daring to start to eye alumni trips again?
No. No, not yet, Barbara, but soon. Soon. I think we are still looking very short term in the future. So still just waiting to see what fall will even look like on campus and sort of what the plan will be, which we should know very soon.
Yeah.
And we'll be sending out a communication about that to the alumni community as soon as we know. However, I will say that those trips and that program will come back. It's just a matter of time. So we will keep you posted as soon as we know, but no, not even a whisper of that yet.
The other thing I want to say is that I have felt blessed by the nationwide reach of the Foster Schultz programs. You know, talk about silver linings. I think that the fact that I can participate in the Foster Schultz Club events from California, because that's where I am, but from, you know, wherever in the world, if I wanted to get up at 3 a.m, that has been a real boon. And I hope that the alumni office will manage to keep at least some Foster Schultz Club events video, virtual, so that those of us who are not fortunate to live in Portland for one reason or another can still partake of that programming. That has been a real blessing.
You have tomorrow's luncheon on your schedule already? Other
I
people
do.
should know about that.
And that's such helpful feedback, Barbara. That's been our sense of things as well. And I agree with you that it's been this huge silver lining. It's similar with reunions, right? I think going forward, we'll always try to incorporate a virtual component to reunions, because so many people, when we kind of switched gears immediately last year and kind of threw together a quick virtual offering for reunions, so many people who joined those meetings had never been to an in-person reunions ever. People from the class of 1975, right? That was their first reunions experience. So that's very important for us to keep going. And so I really appreciate your feedback on Foster Schultz as well.
It's time to kind of wrap things up. It's really been wonderful meandering and series of discoveries for me of hearing from faculty whose work I don't know, and seeing so many familiar faces from and also not so familiar anymore, but the names and memories are strong. Other things in the program, because this is just the beginning of the week. On Friday, a book reading with the New York Times Book Review editor, Gal Beckerman, class of 98, Friday afternoon. A faculty lecture on Saturday morning with Pancho Savory, professor of English and Humanities. And a reunion talent show honoring the memory of Simeon G. Reed, giant cavalcade of alumni talent, emceed by Mateo Birch, class of 82, Saturday afternoon. The class of 61 is sponsoring an event Thursday with Anne-Marie Levine, class of 61. And our final event is on Saturday experiencing change, loss, and resilience, looking back and looking ahead with the class of 61. And then I'll mention this, last but not least, in the rump session on June 18th, the class of 60 has headlined their event, Anything Goes. You all know what a Chailey is? Or a Kaylee, I guess I should say. A multimedia or multi-talented gathering of performers and a conversation simply. The last I looked, there were not many people signed up for that, but take a look on the full schedule at the very end of the line and try to make it for that on the 18th. That's a 3-hour program and a good chance to get together not only with class of 61, but class of 60 and other classes as well. Oh, and I see Ann Squire's name here on the screen. That's a great connection with class of 60. So more to see of all of it. Carrie, I guess we're about at the end of the line, and I'd say we filled the time pretty well. It's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Especially the faculty, very generous of you, and I hope it's enjoyable as well.
It was a pleasure
thank
to hear
you.
your stories and perspectives.
Oh,
Thank
yeah.
you for including us.
That's great.
Yeah, I just wish I heard a lot more from.
Ask us, we're here.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much on behalf of Alumni Programs and Annual Fund, and we hope you have a great virtual reunions week. And thank you so much to the faculty. It was just a pleasure. Have a good
Bye-bye.
one.
Thank you.
Guys.
Hi, Connie.